A young woman out on a walk sees a disturbing scene. And then we head to the hospital to take a look at the story of a young woman who is struggling to stay alive. But when that thin barrier breaks between the world of the living and the land of the dead, nobody knows what's going to happen next. Today on Dead Rabbit Radio. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Dead Rabbit Radio. I'm your host, Jason Carpenter. I'm having a great day. I hope you guys are having a great day too. I hope you guys have some awesome plans for the weekend. Just a quick note, if your plan for the weekend includes seeing the movie I recommended yesterday, it's not out yet. I thought it was coming out this weekend, that movie Longlegs. That looks super creepy. It doesn't come out for another month. So if your plans were like, oh, Jason said this movie might be cool. He said it sounded spooky. Sorry, I jumped the gun on that. I'm a month early. But if you're looking for something to do this weekend, June 15th, this coming Saturday at 1 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, is the 6-year anniversary of Dead Rabbit Radio Livestream. I just realized last night that this is the 6-year anniversary of Dead Rabbit Radio. It's actually today, June 13th, but I didn't remember that. I was editing the episode and I realized I made a mistake with the whole Longlegs thing, and then I go, what? It's 6 years of Dead Rabbit Radio. I totally forgot about it. I knew it was coming up. I think I just spaced on it. So, guys, we're going to be doing a live stream. If you haven't been able to catch a live stream before, they are on the Dead Rabbit Radio YouTube channel. They're free to anyone. It's not something that's behind a paywall for Patreons or anything like that. And you guys just come on out to the YouTube channel. And it's all about just questions and talking. It's a lot of fun. I don't do them that often. I don't do live streams often because they take a lot of work and they take a lot out of me. They usually last, I would say, minimum an hour. They're generally around an hour and a half, but people just pop in and out. If you guys want to interact with the Fluffle community, you guys got burning questions you want to ask me, stop on by. It starts at 1 p.m. Pacific Standard Time on Saturday and goes till, I'd say max 2 hours. I think we've done a couple that were 2 hours. It takes a lot out of me. Usually we do a live stream on an anniversary, and we do a live stream at Thanksgiving. And in the past, we've been able to do one on Christmas as well. But come on out. Come on out. I love hearing about your guys' questions. It's just a fun, laid-back time. We kind of go behind the scenes sometimes. I'm going to open this Diet Pepsi here real quick. Swing on by. I think it'd be really, really cool. Today, though, will be our 6th anniversary episode. Our 6th anniversary special. So let's go ahead and get this ball rolling. First off, running into Dead Rabbit Radio Command right now. Everyone get on your feet and give it up for our newest Patreon supporter. 925 at the morgue. Woohoo, yeah, wee! He's all running on in. He's running on in like the Undertaker, wrestling us. Get off of us, get off of us. Paul Bearer is following. If you don't know what wrestling is, you're like, what? Is that a real Undertaker? Is that a horror movie icon? 6'7", muscle-bound Undertaker. 925 in the morgue. You're going to be our captain, our pilot this episode. If you guys can't support the show financially, I say it a million times, and I'll say it a million more. That is okay. Don't ever feel like you're less of a community member because you can't support the show financially. Those of you who do, I deeply appreciate it. It helps out a lot. But if you can't, I appreciate you guys as well. I want you guys to know that. If you guys can't support the show financially, just spread the word about Dead Rabbit Radio. Tell your friends, tell your family, tell everyone you know. Dead Rabbit Radio is your favorite paranormal show. Now, let's look at this too. I also, we're pulling out all the stops for this anniversary episode. Look at this artwork. This is our artwork, our Fan Art Friday submission from Michael A. We got a picture of a gray alien throwing up the peace sign because he knows he can't take on Earth. Gray aliens are finally fessing up that humans are better. He's throwing up the peace sign, got a Dead Rabbit Radio shirt on. Little UFO in the background. And a globe The planet Earth in the background. You know what's funny? So I do have stories planned, but this episode may kind of flow a little bit weird back and forth because it is an anniversary episode. I feel like I get a little bit of leeway, right? Look at this picture. If you're driving a car, I know that you can't, but if you're just sitting there, or if you're doing the dishes, keep doing the dishes. But I noticed something recently, and to be fair, I didn't notice it. It was pointed out to me, and you guys might send me a bunch of emails and YouTube comments, and I'm fine with that. But something was pointed out to me recently. A lot of times when we talk about Mandela effects, there's the big ones like Berenstain Bears versus Berenstain Bears, how the name is spelled. Every so often they'll have one saying New Zealand was on the other side of Australia. I remember when I was in the timeline, or a different timeline, New Zealand was like closer to Australia or on the other side of Australia or whatever. I don't know where New Zealand is. I could probably figure it out if you gave me a globe, but I couldn't tell you it was verse one place or another. But a couple weeks ago, I was online. I don't remember exactly where I saw this, but they were talking about Mandela Effect. And somebody goes, dude, what happened to the North Pole? So let's get this party started. 925 at the morgue. Let's go ahead and toss you the keys to the Jason Jalopy. Let's leave behind Dead Rabbit Radio Command. Drive us up to the North Pole. Oh, you can't. You can't. We're all sinking into the Arctic waters. 925 in the morgue could not find the North Pole. There is no landmass at the North Pole. Now, here's the thing. And a lot of people go, I showed this to Sabine the other day. I said, hey, do you have a globe? She goes, I could probably find one. And she's like looking around. I didn't tell her what it was about. She pulls a globe out and I go, find the North Pole. And she goes, do you mean like magnetic north? And I go, no, the North Pole, the place where Santa Claus lives. She goes, well, it's here. It's right at the top. Now, conveniently, the globe she had, it connected right where the landmass should be. And I go, there's no North Pole. When I was a kid, I was taught about explorers reaching the South Pole and planting a flag, and reaching the North Pole and planting a flag. At the top of the world, there was a chunk of land that made up the North Pole. It wasn't shifting ice. It wasn't melting ice flows or whatever in the water. There was actually a place up there called the North Pole. Not magnetic North Pole. That's all for like nerds and sailors and stuff like that. The North Pole. There was a landmass up there. We studied this. You can clearly see from Michael A's drawing, he's from my timeline as well. He made it a little bit bigger than I remember. But the idea that there was a landmass, it wasn't huge, but it was there. And you could walk across it and plant a flag on it. It was something that explorers did. They did it to the North Pole and the South Pole. Well, when the person online, because I see all this stuff constantly, all these Mandela, all the reading I do for this podcast, you have to like sift through it. You're like, because you're trying to find the gems. Found one. This is a gem, right? As you're breaking out your globes, you're like, Apparently, there is no landmass up there, and there never was. You'll look at shifting ice flows. Most globes will just have an empty ocean up there. No, nothing. There's no North Pole. And a lot of people go, well, there never was a North Pole. But listen, I don't know when Nelson Mandela was born or died or when he was supposed to have died a second time. I don't remember any of that stuff. It wasn't super important to me. But I do remember where Santa Claus lives. Sabine goes, you can't talk about Santa Claus and use it to explain something that doesn't exist. I go, but here's the thing. Why would you say Santa Claus lived in the North Pole if Santa Claus didn't exist? Why would you say Santa Claus lived in the North Pole if the North Pole didn't exist? When she replied, well, if you say a leprechaun came from the leprechaun land, that doesn't exist. Okay, so maybe she's a little on spot with the whole, you can't use a fictional thing to explain why a real thing doesn't exist. But I'm pretty sure, I'm more than pretty sure, I'm very, very sure that there used to be a landmass up there that explorers conquered. It was a thing. It wasn't just taking a boat. People were using boats. People were trying to figure out like quicker ways to different continents, but there was several attempts to try to reach the North Pole and put a flag there. And now it just isn't there. There's no North Pole. Not magnetic North Pole, actual land, a stable piece of land at the North Pole. Doesn't exist. And never has. So, anyways, I want to start off. The reason it reminded me of that was Michael A's drawing. But what a way to start off our 6th anniversary special. Me talking about a scientific topic that I have very limited knowledge on. Just like in the first episode, I read an article about can animals speak to each other. And I just translated poorly, like not the animal's language, but people have said, that's not what that article said, Jason. what you went off on. I'll put that episode in the show notes if you want to listen to episode 1. It was about as much nonsense as this one. Okay, 925 of the morgue. Let's go ahead and leave behind the North Pole, which we never reached because it no longer exists. I'm going to toss you the keys to the Dead Rabbit dirigible. Everyone climb on board. 925, why don't you fly us all the way out to California? Headed all the way down to California. You know, I'm going to go off script again here. This is something I just found right before we started recording. A lot of times when I get supporters or really email from someone, they have an unusual name. Sometimes I go, I wonder if this guy has a podcast or a YouTube channel or something like that. So when I got 925 in the morgue, when I saw that pop through the Patreon, I go, interesting name. I go, I wonder if this guy is a content creator. So I typed it into Google, and as far as I can tell, no, if he is a content creator, you don't have good SEO. I couldn't pull it up. But one thing I did pull up, this interesting tidbit, it's a little depressing too. Contra Costa County back in 2016, it was July 24th, 2016, a woman was crossing the highway and got hit by a car. It was a hit and run. The car took off. This was about 2 a.m. She was hit by a car, the car took off, and they left her in the road, and she died at the scene. By the time the medics got there, she was already dead. What's interesting is the police didn't know who it was. They just have this body that shows up in the middle of the road at 2 a.m. So they put out this description. She was an adult female, 50 to 60 years old, with dark hair, a little bit of graying, 5'5", 143 pounds, and she was wearing a gray, blue buttoned pinstripe shirt. They also took a photograph of a unique item she was wearing. She had this knitted red and gray pouch, like a necklace, with a crystal inside the pouch. And that was the photo that they posted on Facebook, and that was the photo that they sent to all the newspapers to publish. We need to find out who this woman is. And they did get responses. They actually did identify her pretty much the next day. She was a 62-year-old woman named Marie Cellino of Concord, California. It's a weird thing to just stumble across. I know I did type in at the morgue, so I was going to get some morgue stuff, but it's just a little weird piece of drama that happened on that night. And I'm sure pretty much everyone's forgotten about it unless you personally knew Marie. Most people who read this in the newspaper, they've probably completely forgotten about this. It's been 8 years. Unless you knew Marie, you might have read this article in Contra Costa County and then just gone on with your day. The people who would still remember her are the people who knew her in life and the driver who killed her. And as far as I can tell, they've never been caught. The person who hit Marie got away with it, which is creepy. The idea that in 2016 you can be unidentified, it's a little creepy. Because you think about it, obviously she didn't have any ID on her. She didn't have any ID on her if they couldn't ID her at the scene. Locals were able, either they saw a photo of this necklace and someone goes, oh my God, that's Marie. I know Marie has that necklace. Or it was a description, or Marie didn't show up the next day where she was supposed to be and someone called the cops, said, I don't know where Marie's at. One of these things happened. But if Marie was hundreds of miles away on the other side of the country, if she's down in Gainesville, Florida, and got hit by a car, and they posted this description of her and this pouch. She's from Concord, California. She gets killed in Florida. Would anyone ever put the pieces together? She would have remained a Jane Doe for years and years and years if she was ever identified. So it's interesting that we're still in that moment in time that, you understand why people weren't identified in like the 60s, people weren't identified in the 50s or 40s, 1800s, because the record keeping wasn't that good. The documents weren't that good. Having a driver's license on you at all times, not everyone was doing that. But now we have got all of these identifiers and you can still just be a body in a morgue. And then again, the guy who hit her, or the girl who hit her, we don't know, never been caught. They left that scene and continued on with their life, even though they killed Marie that night. Interesting. Just stumbled across it. I imagine that it was the necklace and the crystal around that photograph is what helped them identify her. Because the last clothes you wore would be, unless you saw her that day wearing that button-down shirt, you wouldn't go, yeah, Marie, she's wearing that. May not recognize that shirt on her, but that pouch would be something going, no, that's her. I recognize that pouch. Imagine reading the newspaper that morning and you see that photo and you're like, oh my God. And you'd have to call the police and say, I know who that is. I know her name. Her name's Marie Cellino. So thank you 925 of the Morgue for that upbeat story. Keep flying us down to California. That's not the real reason we are headed down there. We're headed down to California to take a look at this story. We're headed to Orange, California. We're in between the years 2002 and 2005. In Orange, California, there's a place called Santiago Creek. And in fact, it's a creek/hiking trail, bicycle trail, nature area that's so big, it actually extends out of the city. Santiago Creek, as far as a hiking, bicycling area, it's 35 miles long. Very well traveled, very popular site for people, families. They spend a lot of time on this trail. And we're about to meet one of these people. We're going to call her Monica. We don't have her exact name. Monica lives in Orange. But for the past couple months, she'd been up at Lake Tahoe. She'd been spending some time at Lake Tahoe, but her vacation is over. I don't know. Maybe it was a work visit. Maybe she was building log cabins. I'm not for sure. But it's time for her to come back home. So Monica leaves Lake Tahoe. She'd been there for a couple months. She comes back to Orange. The morning after she gets back, she goes, you know what? I need to go for a walk. I'm going to walk through this town. I'm going to walk through the town that I love so much. Haven't been here in a while. Let's go. So she gets up, she gets dressed, and she goes on a walk. And she's walking. I got some actual, directions here. If you live in Orange, you can reenact this. Depending how you like the story, you may or may not want to. You may or may not want to. It's pretty creepy, but Monica said she was going on a walk from her house to Old Town Orange. And to get there, you have to cross this bridge over Grand Avenue. I think it's kind of like a bridge or an overpass. It's where you can walk across it and cars can come across it. And this bridge, she's walking over this bridge over Grand Avenue, and it goes over a wash in the creek. I had to look this up. I didn't know what this was. A wash in a creek is a dry part of the creek that if there's snow melt or heavy rains, then it's an active body of water. But most of the year, it's just dry. Once the water starts falling, it'll fill in. So you're basically walking over a dry creek bed, but it's still part of this huge nature area. She's walking over the bridge, and she looks down, and she sees a dark-haired man standing there. But there's something wrong with him. She can tell there's something wrong with him. He's clearly agitated. Agitated to the point that he's disoriented. He's kind of looking around, wild eyes, and he keeps grabbing at his shirt, grabbing at his chest. It's like he's clawing at his clothing, and he's just looking around. Disoriented, agitated, doesn't know where he's at, doesn't know why he's there. Acting odd, to say the least. This area, I fact-checked this. This is pretty easy to fact-check. Monica explains this area, she has had issues with having to call the police before on perverts. And sure enough, they do have weirdos running around Santiago Creek, groping women and doing horrible things and sex crimes and stuff like that, just weirdos. I remember in Sacramento, when I lived up in Sacramento, we had the American River Trail. And I was talking to a cop buddy of mine, just hanging out, and he told me, he goes, don't go down to the American, what was it, or it might have been the Sacramento River Trail. You're like, dude, I need to know, because I have to go hiking tomorrow, and I got to pick one of these two trails. It was either the American River Trail or the Sacramento River Trail. I think it was the Sacramento River Trail. It was over by Sac State. I was talking to an officer, a buddy of mine, and he goes, dude, don't ever go walk down there. You know, you'll see families down there, people on bikes and stuff like that. He goes, it's super dangerous down there. I was like, really? He goes, yeah. We actually have a big problem. Dudes are raping other dudes. I was like, really? He goes, yeah. And the problem is that no one ever wants to press charges because they don't want to get their name in the newspaper. They don't want, I mean, that's one of the horrible things about sex crimes against men is they very often go uncharged. You don't want to press charges because you don't want people to know that happened to you. It's just like a traffic accident or getting robbed. It's a crime. People shouldn't think less of you if you got mugged. People shouldn't think less of you if you got assaulted. And people shouldn't think less of you if you got raped on the Sacramento River Trail. But he goes, there's a huge problem with that down there. Huge problem. So I was like, okay, well, yeah, definitely not going down there. But then I forgot what trail he was talking about. I was like, oh no. Gotta go on a marathon tomorrow. So, yeah, I think it's just kind of general an issue with nature trails. There's a lot of bushes you can hide in. A lot of people are on their own, joggers with their headphones on. It would actually be a perfect place to prey on people. So Monica's looking down and she sees this guy. He's obviously out of it. He keeps clawing at his shirt, and she goes, if he takes that shirt off, I'm going to call the cops. I'm going to think that this guy might be getting ready to do something really creepy. Takes his shirt off, what comes next? Take your pants off? I'm going to call the cops. So anyway, she's watching him. She's on this bridge, and she's looking down, and she's watching him be all agitated, clawing at his chest, clawing at his clothes, and then all of a sudden, he bends down, and there's a red messenger bag laying on the ground. Monica's looking at it and she goes, huh? And then she sees a white sheet right by the messenger bag as well. The white sheet's on the ground right by this agitated man. She's looking at it. She's looking at the scene and she thinks to herself, where did those items come from? I didn't see those a second ago. This red messenger bag and this white sheet. And the man picks the messenger bag up. And then, nothing. There's no one down there. The white sheet's gone, the messenger bag is gone, and the man's gone. And she's kind of looking and she is thinking, I don't know what happened. She said there was a nearby wall. He could have hopped over that, but maybe he hid behind that tree. She's like, whatever, right? Previously, she was ready to call the cops, and now that she's lost track of the man, she's like, whatever. The guy ran off. The guy must have ran off, and, she didn't see which direction he went. Not a big deal. Not a big deal. It continues on her walk. Eventually, she gets to a local Starbucks. She calls up her husband, says, hey, can you come pick me up? He drives out there, picks her up. As they're driving home, they're driving over that bridge. Monica says, hey, you know what's weird? I don't even know how to... I was walking over this bridge earlier. I saw the oddest thing. There was a man down there. He's acting like a freak. He was completely agitated, disoriented. He kept pulling at his shirt, clawing at his chest. And then he just kind of vanished. Like, I look down. It's broad daylight. This is morning when this happens. I look down. I see this guy. He's acting weird. Then he picks up his bag. I think it's his bag. It just kind of was there. And then he was gone. And the husband's driving the car, and he turns to her and he says, you saw a ghost. Someone was stabbed to death down there while you were gone. This was posted online by someone going underneath the name Polly Size. It's a really interesting ghost story when we look at it from a couple different angles. First off, daylight. Right? These are the type of ghosts, I've said this before a lot on this show. I think we see more ghosts than we think. But we expect to see them in spooky places. If you see a 10-year-old boy in a cemetery at 3 a.m., you can make an assumption that this boy's either lost to try to find his parents, or it's a ghost. Especially if he vanished. You'd be like, wow, that's a ghost. I always use this analogy, but if you're walking through a toy store, and you look down an aisle and you see a little boy staring up at the Paw Patrol toys, and then you go to the next aisle to look at the cool toys, the Transformers, and then a minute later, you went back to the Paw Patrol aisle and he was gone, you wouldn't think that was a ghost. You would think he went to another aisle or his parents picked him up. It would never cross your mind that that was a ghost. If you stood there for that full minute and stared at him, which I do not recommend doing, you'll get arrested. But if you did and you watched him blink out of existence, then you would know that was a ghost. I think we see ghosts all the time. That's kind of what we have here, right? A ghost scene in the middle of the day. And at first you just think he's a weirdo, but when he does something ghostly, aka vanish, it gives you a pause. But even then, she wasn't like, I think I saw a ghost today. She just goes, I saw something weird today. I saw a weirdo, and he was doing all this weird stuff. That was the main thrust of the story. I saw a weirdo doing weird stuff, and then at the end, I just lost sight of him. He disappeared. I don't know what happened. And then he filled in the blanks. You saw a ghost. Someone was murdered down there. So it's interesting we have a daylight apparition. Secondly, what a terrifying view of death that this story is. Because it's this idea, I mean, it's one of two things is going on here. It could be a ghost as in it's a recording of an event. And that's the type of ghost that it's not like their soul is trapped on Earth. It's just the last few moments of life being replayed over and over again. Like if you're listening to a Paula Abdul cassette, you can't actually... We love you, Paula. Play another Paula Abdul song. MC Scat Cat. Come on, let's do something. And then the tape won't change. It's the same tape. That type of ghost is basically a recording. And that's what this could be. With him kind of clutching at his chest and then walking over and picking up the messenger bag, he could have been stabbed to death. And in his final moments, in almost a shocked state, he walks over and he's still thinking, I can just get home. I'm going to walk home. Everything will be okay. So he picks up his red messenger bag and doesn't make it. He dies. Could be that. But it could also be, and this is a more terrifying version, is that his soul is still trapped down there and it's still trying to process what happened to him. The last thing he remembers is getting stabbed in the chest and dying, and his soul is stuck there, and he's grabbing at his chest now because he remembers the physical pain of it. He's trying to make sense of all this stuff. He's trying to just grab his messenger bag and go home, but his home isn't on Earth anymore. His soul is trapped here. It's interesting, too, because, I see a lot of comments online where people go, a lot of people make fun of ghost stories and stuff like that, and they're like, why do all ghosts dress like the 1800s? Why do all ghosts... They don't. This is the typical type of ghost story where it's modern-day ghosts, but what I find interesting about this ghost story as well is that other elements of the area seemed to be part of the paranormal activity as well. His messenger bag, for example. So his clothes, we do see most ghosts are wearing clothing, but his messenger bag on the ground, a separate item, also appears in the haunting. That messenger bag may have had a special meaning to this man in life. It could have contained something special, something valuable, something he needed, and it's basically being created as part of the haunting, which would make sense because we do have ghosts who, like Civil War ghosts, will have guns with them. You'll hear the sounds of guns firing. Civil War ghosts, army ghosts are armed sometimes. We have that story, it's the oldest known haunting that's still happening, of the Roman soldiers in Britain. They were on horseback, carrying shields and had sandals. So we have this, and the white sheet. I don't think she meant like a sheet of paper. I think it was like a blanket or a sheet or something that law enforcement or a coroner may use to cover up the body temporarily while it's on the ground. So is that also part of the haunting? Because that disappeared as well. And she goes, I did not see the messenger bag or the white sheet until the man bent over to pick him up. Or pick the messenger bag. And she said, I did not see the messenger bag, the red messenger bag, or the white sheet until he bent over to pick up the messenger bag. Then she sees these other items added to the same very, very bizarre ghost story. It's almost like a scene in time was saved. Fascinating, though. I mean, it's horrific that this man died. It's horrific that this man died. But taking away the human drama, it's quite a fascinating ghost story. 925 at the morgue. I'm going to go ahead and toss you the keys to the world-famous Carpenter Copter. Everyone climb on board. We are headed up to the hospital. We're headed to the hospital. Walking around, we see all these sick people. They're all, help me. We walk in, we're like, what do you need, sir? And they're like, water. This isn't a well-tended hospital. We're like, what? You just need water? Yeah, I'm totally fine. He's all sitting in the waiting room. He's like, I'm not even sick. I'm here to see somebody. So we give him a cup of water, and he's like, oh, thanks, bro. And he walks out. We're walking around the hospital. Johnny boy, is that you? And we're like, wow. Okay, yeah, sure. We notice he has a really nice hospital room. We're like, this guy's about to kick the bucket. Let's get in his will. Grandpa, it's me, Johnny boy. And he's like, oh, Johnny boy, I love you so much. Can you give me a cup of water? Everyone's dying of dehydration. We're like, yeah, sure, old man. Get a cup of water. He's like, thank you. You guys are all in my will now. We're like, yes. Walking around. I knew a friend who did hospice work, and I told her she really loved her job and she was good at it. But I said, you know what you really need to do, right? It'd be really nice to these old people and get in their wills. You know, give them a little bit extra, give them a little extra water, keep them hydrated. Who knows? You might end up an heir to like 15 different wills. We're walking around this hospital, though. We're helping everyone out. Eventually, it's like the ending of Fury Road, where we just turn on the giant water spigot and it's cascading down the hospital. Everyone's drinking water. But we're here for one patient in particular. A woman named Carol. Now, Carol's actually a longtime listener of Dead Rabbit Radio, and she interacts all the time on the YouTube channel. awesome. She's an awesome supporter of the show. She sent me this the other day. Really, I think she sent me this last night. I got this last night, and I thought, what a way to celebrate the 6th anniversary of Dead Rabbit Radio. It really was awesome timing, Carol, that you sent this in. Because the thing I love most about this show is you guys. I could read this stuff by myself and just sit at home and go, wow, that was great. But we've created this community. And it's not just about reading paranormal stories. We're sharing paranormal stories. Not just with each other, but with the world. I mean, seriously, guys, I cannot tell you how much I love doing this show. And I hope you guys... Actually, I know you guys love listening to it because I get the emails and I get the comments and stuff like that. And what a great community. 6 years ago, I was just sitting there. And I decided to do this. I'll put that episode in the show notes. It's kind of like how the show got started. And here it is now. And let that be a moment for you to think of when you want to do something and it seems too big or too hard or too long. No, that's not sexual pun. It's not sexual pun. Too big, too hard, too long. Just do it. Just do it. That's not a sexual pun either. Just do it. Like, here we are, 6 years later. We're sitting here still doing this, and I'm forever grateful. But Carol, what a great way to end. Not end. What a great way to start the new year of Dead Rabbit Radio. Fantastic. Carol, I'm saying that's all fantastic. Carol's dying in a hospital room. This was her story she shared with me. Back in 2009, she had back surgery. And they were supposed to go in and trim a disc. But during the surgery, she got a bacteria infection. So the doctor's like, hey, Carol, yeah, remember how we cut you open last night? We were going in to trim that bone, you know, or spine, that little disc in you. Well, it turns out that you are now infested with bacteria. She's she looks like the Mucinex cartoon guy. She's a big blob of infection. She has bacterial meningitis. Her body is racked with pain as her nervous system is just firing off. She said that when you have this meningitis, it's just extremely painful. Right? Still probably underselling it. She's like, She's telling the doctor, yeah, I knew something was wrong when I felt like I was dipped in lava. She's screaming. And the doctor goes, yeah, we're going to have to treat that whole bacteria meningitis thing. You're not going to be able to leave the hospital. You're going to have to be here for a while because this could kill you. In fact, Carol said that she was coated. She was coated in bacteria. No, she was coded, C-O-D-E-D, which means basically that your heart stops or something has gone so seriously wrong that a special team has to come in and bring you back to life. She said that happened twice. She has it cleared. All the bacteria gets stronger. Now it's electrical bacteria. They're like, yay! So at this point, she's been coded twice, and they go in to do more surgery. They actually have to remove the disc. The disc that they originally were just going to trim, they had to remove it. And her heart rate was too low at this point. They could not give her any pain relief. Could not give her any pain medication because they were afraid that that would kill her. She's really hanging on by a thread at this point. They can't do anything for her pain. She was just in excruciating agony as her entire nervous system is infested with bacteria, the little monster people, atom-sized monsters. You're like, Jason, it's not bacteria. It doesn't have a bunch of boogeymen in her capillaries. She's in a lot of pain. And to make matters either better or worse, depending on what side of the bed you're sitting on, Carol's laying there and her two twin sisters, so one pair of twin sisters, but she's not a twin. It's not triplets. I was confused too. I go, oh, what? Carol, normal, twin sisters, her twin sisters sitting next to her. Carol, not a twin. Carol's in bed, and her twin sisters are constantly yapping about whatever. talk, and Carol just wants to be left alone. She goes, I'm already cranky because I'm missing part of my body. They took a discount. I'm extra cranky because I have this infection that may kill me, and I'm ultra level cranky because I'm in a lot of pain. When you're in pain, that's like the worst thing people can do is to just be around you. You just want to sit and sulk and try to ignore the pain. But she goes, my sisters are just, yeah, and I kept telling them to go home. Go home. I don't want you guys here anymore. You're hurting their feelings. And since they're twins, if you hurt one of their feelings, the other twin feels it too. She's like, just go home, and they won't leave her alone. They're just talking the whole time, and it's driving her nuts. And finally she goes, can you guys just go? I'm like, go to the cafeteria, get some tea, get something to drink. I heard that they got the water turned back on at this hospital. Go. And Carol's sisters leave. And she's, for the first time in a while, by herself. They leave to go get tea, and Carol's laying there in her bed when all of a sudden she thinks, oh my God, they finally gave me something for the pain. Oh man, this feels good. And that's when she feels the layers leave her body. Carol said, I'm laying in this bed and I feel no pain. But then I feel the emotion of guilt. Everything I've ever felt guilty for, even the concept of guilt, I feel it leave my body. Like a layer was lifted off of me, this wet blanket that had been strapped over me. My entire life was just pulled off and thrown away. Guilt as a concept disappeared. And then the next layer, I feel regret peel off of my essence. The very concept of thinking I should have peels back like a layer. And all of these moments, these emotions, start to get peeled off of her. These layers lifting, then floating away. She says, all of the hurt that people had done to me, the things that I held on to, long ago squabbles, serious disagreements, hate for former friends, just lifted off of me. As well as the hurt that I did to them. The things I had done through my life where I had hurt somebody. I feel the concept of that, the very thought of that being a thing, lift off of me. Gone. No pain, no sorrow, no guilt, no regret, no envy. It's all gone. Carol's uncle walks into the room. A sight for sore eyes. Carol didn't expect to see her uncle here. She jumps up out of the hospital bed and says, Uncle, oh my God. And she runs over to give him a hug. And her uncle, who was never a stern man, this time held her at a distance. He would not let her hug him. Her uncle holds her at a distance so they can look face to face. He does not want a hug. He has a message to give her. He says, in an upset voice, which Carol thought was odd because her uncle was never upset with her. Why now? But her uncle looks at her and says, you gotta try harder. There are two guys that still need you here. Carol thinks for a moment. It doesn't really make sense. Try harder about what? She knows who the two guys are. It's her husband at the time and her son. She understands that, but she doesn't understand why she's being told to try harder. She's doing better. Carol actually turns and points back at the bed. She goes, Uncle, look, I am doing better. I'm not in pain anymore. when she turns back to face her uncle, he's looking deep into her eyes. He says, "That's not better, Carol." A thought appears in Carol's head, and she slowly turns back to look at the hospital bed. When she turned and pointed at the bed and said, "Look, no, I'm doing better, I'm not in pain anymore," she didn't realize it. But when she turns back and looks again, that's when she sees, lying in that bed, her own body. She sees medics gathered around her. She's coded. This is the third time they have to come in and resuscitate her. When she turns back, she sees herself lying in the bed. She sees the medics around her. She sees them prep the paddles, push them to her chest, and go clear. And she sees her body glow orange from the inside out. In an instant, Carol's soul is back in her body, completely racked with pain. Agonizing, burning pain. Can't give her any pain medication because her heart rate's too low. So she just lays there and feels the inferno raging throughout her entire nervous system. After she was resuscitated this time, after they were able to stabilize her, her sisters are allowed back into the room. Carol's still processing all of this stuff, right? She did just have a near-death experience, and then she was forced back into a body that is just completely broken at this point. She's still processing everything. When her two sisters walk in, she tells them, "Oh my God, you guys won't believe it. If you guys were here earlier before I had a heart attack, right? I know I sent you out to get tea, but you guys missed our uncle. Our uncle came by." One of her sisters goes, "Oh my God, are you serious?" Yeah, he stopped by. He came by. He made me get back in this painful body. I'm still processing all that stuff. And her sister goes, "Uncle's been dead for a couple years." Their uncle had been dead for quite a few years, and Carol had not even questioned that when he walked into the room. But this is such an interesting near-death experience because we have these very odd features to it. And this one, when the sisters came back into the room and Carol said, "Hey, our uncle was here," and then Carol remembers that uncle had died a couple years ago. One of the sisters said when she came back into the room, she smelt the very familiar smell of their uncle's aftershave. It was a scent that these girls linked to their uncle. When that sister walked in and she smelled it, she thought, it must be one of the doctors. One of the doctors must have been wearing this aftershave. Now, while that is possible, we don't know. I mean, if it was Brute, everybody wears Brute aftershaves, but that's definitely possible it was one of the doctors. Very interesting that she didn't smell it earlier. She smelt it after the appearance of Billy. And ghosts leaving behind a smell is one of the most common, generally one of the first signs of a haunting. If someone has a particular smell attached to them, cigar smoke, a certain type of perfume, alcohol, if they're a heavy drinker. Not all of us have a signature smell. But if you did, that might be the first way that you manifest. We do see that happen a lot. Very interesting. So now we have somebody who's having a near-death experience and a third party interacting with it. I can't think of another time this has happened. I know that there are times where doctors have noticed weird things going on during one of their patients' near-death experiences, so that's probably pretty comparable. But this wasn't even that. She was back alive. This situation where the uncle was there happened when the girls were gone. She was coded. She was resuscitated. The girls come into the room at a later time. They're not allowed right when the doctors are all shocking her. And the sister goes, "Oh my God, I smell Uncle's aftershave." So we have this ghost and a near-death experience happening at the same time. They really are two separate things. Most near-death experiences other people do not interact with. Very odd in that case. And kind of going off what happened in yesterday. Was it yesterday? It was a couple days ago. It might have been Monday. We did a story about a guy who had a near-death experience, and he had totally changed the way he looked at the world, but not in like a, oh good, now I know there's life after death, and now I know we only live one day at a time. He actually made him a paranoid wreck. It really, really freaked him out, and he had a hard time coming back from it. Carol kind of has an interesting take on this as well. Carol said, she emailed me all this. She goes, it took me a few years, but in a way, I really resented being brought back to life. She goes, you have no idea what it felt like. To call it euphoria would be limiting it. It was bliss beyond all reason. And I was immediately thrust back into this body that was ravaged by an infection. And that's bad enough, but then just the day in, day out struggles of mankind. She touched the infinite joy for just a split second. And then she was forced back home into this body. She goes, I really had a hard time with it. It became dangerous. It became dangerous because it was such a beautiful feeling. I wanted it again. I wanted it again. It was actually, Carol said, becoming dangerous for her mental health. Now, she did go through therapy, and she did have to come to terms with, well, yeah, that is beautiful and all, but you still have things to do on Earth. You're still a living, breathing human. And it might suck. But here we are. This is interesting. I've seen this in near-death experience accounts as well. She said that moment where she was feeling all of that negativity lifted off of her, when she feels no pain, when she's out of the hospital bed, she's talking to her uncle. She said that felt more real than anything on Earth. It's super interesting. I've come across accounts like that. The near-death experience, people have compared to when you have a super realistic dream and then you wake up and you go, oh, that was just a dream. This is the real world. I can feel the air pressure on my body. I can smell. I can touch things. And all those physical sensations were gone in the dream, yet I was so convinced that dream was real. But now that I'm in the real world, I see what the real world's like. It's been compared to that. And no matter how realistic or how important or how meaningful that dream was, it was just a dream. And you slowly forget about it, and then you go about your day. I've heard people compare, that's what death is like. Like, that's the reality. This is the dream. It is weird how dreams seem so realistic and so like this is the only thing that matters until you wake up. But people have compared death to that. And she goes, it just felt like the real world. And it was so beautiful and pure. And it's funny because she didn't fly to heaven. She didn't see an angel. She didn't gaze at the infinite horizon of all creation. She just stood up out of her hospital bed. I'm not, she's like, what? Oh man, she's all crying. She's like, oh, why did I send you the story? No, I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I'm saying that thing about it. All she did was get out of the hospital bed and talk to her uncle. And she had all of these feelings. Beauty and wonder and joy. It was so pure that it was actually breaking her in her daily life because she was thinking, why do I have to be here when I know what's there? And she just got a glimpse, the smallest little glimpse of what is over on the other side. And it was still so much that she wanted more of it. She does state, and I think this is important too, that she goes, I'm not going to kill myself. She goes, I'm not going to kill myself. I'm not going to hurt myself. As much as I want that back, as beautiful as that was, she's on a much healthier mental state than she was back then when she was very resentful towards it. But she says she would never hurt herself. She would never try to commit suicide to speed up the process. And I think that's important too. When we talk about these near-death experience stories, it's not about, you're like, wow, Jason's making this sound really, really good. And I got bills coming up. And, I don't know. He did describe it as the infinite frontier of the universe or whatever he said. I don't want to be in this reality anymore. That's never the answer. That's never the answer. So it's not about self-harm. It's not about suicide or anything like that. I know sometimes these near-death stories can feel fantastic. Having all of that weight lifted off of you, like Carol was describing. I mean, what a beautiful moment. I hope we all get to go through that when we die normally, not trying to hasten it. But imagine if all of that negativity, which I believe, we got to finish this story, right? I'm already going off the side note because there's something really, really cool about this story. And I love it. Carol, thanks for sending it over. Thank you so much, everyone, for being part of this community, because this is what it's about, is gathering these stories, gathering these accounts up. I found this absolutely fascinating. Carol says she's not afraid to die now because she knows there is something else. She also says that she's not... Let me actually go back to her email, because she wrote me a response. I want to make sure. I was at work when she responded to me, but because this last part, and then we'll wrap it up. I know this episode's going long, but this is super fascinating how this... She pointed this out. She said, also, you should know that even though I was raised religious, she was raised a Mormon, and that's going to play a part in this next part. She goes, even though I was raised religious, I am anything but a believer and don't even know what I believe in as far as a higher being. So really all I came away with was that we don't fade to black. And it's an amazing feeling, but as far as heaven and hell, I never got that far. What I find super interesting about this story, this is kind of setting the stage for this. Fascinating. I did not even think about this before. Carol says, I was raised in the Mormon church, but she moved out of it in her high school teenage years. She really just kind of stopped being an active church-going Mormon. And now she's saying, I really don't have a particular faith system in general. Her uncle, who had passed away before them, he was already passed away when this story took place, was also raised in the church. He was also a Mormon who was raised in the church. He didn't bring it up. He dies, goes to the other side. And here you have this young woman, wife, mother. She's dying. They're both Mormon. Carol's just kind of not an active Mormon. Her faith isn't with that group anymore. And she goes, listen, I was a bit of a wild child, right? I wasn't the perfect kid of any religion. I was a human. And I made human decisions, which sometimes can be bad decisions. She said, my uncle never brought up the church. Never said, hey, you need to get back to church. Never said, hey, you need to change your ways. Never said, listen, this is a second chance. You need to get back into that world. You got to start praying again. You got to start talking to God. None of that came up. And when she said that, when she goes, yeah, it was interesting, we didn't talk about the church at all. I started thinking and I go, and I could be wrong. I'll put all my episodes about near-death experiences in the show notes. We've had people who have had near-death experiences where they go to heaven. We've had people who have had near-death experiences where they go to hell. I cannot think of a near-death experience story that we've covered or that I've read, and again, I could be wrong. You guys might be able to find that I covered this, where the ghost or the spirit guide or the angel or what have you, when they're telling people, hey, you have to go back, it's not your time. I don't think I've ever come across one where they say, also, you need to go back to church, you need to pray more, you need to start following the 10 Commandments. We know you've been you're basically on the cusp of getting into heaven or not. You need to be a stronger adherent to your religion. Or you need to change your religion. You need to do something different. You're actually on the wrong path. I've never come across that. right now sitting here, again, I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure we've never had a spirit guide say, we know you've fallen away from the church, so if this is just the taste, and the next time you die, if you want to get here, you got to go back to church. The people who go to hell, they seem to have a self-correcting mechanism. Again, I cannot recall. It's been a long time since we covered the negative near-death experiences, but I cannot recall someone having a horrific vision of hell and then being told, you better become a Christian Scientist. Go back to Christian Science church or else. It's kind of just a wake-up call that there's something wrong in your life, and people will go become more religious after having a negative near-death experience because they'll go, wow, something's not right here. I died and I saw eternal darkness. It's not what I want. So I'm going to figure out what I need to do. But I can't recall of a time where a specific religion, or really any religion, was brought up. Now, am I wrong? I'd be interested if you guys aren't doing anything this weekend. If you want to listen to those past episodes, super fascinating. The fact that this guy, the uncle, didn't come back and say, Carol, you haven't been to church in a long time. Your faith has left the Latter-day Saint community. I'd love to take you with me when it's your time, but you need to spend more energy on earth with the church. Didn't even bring it up. It's fascinating. I never considered that before. And it might be that a lot of times we don't have the religions stated of the people in the story. Some people, they may go, well, I used to be a Presbyterian when I was a kid, but then they die and they have this angelic vision of the afterlife. That's cool. This one, she didn't get to see that. She just saw a relative. They're both of the same religion, and there was no religious talk. I find that absolutely fascinating. Because what does that mean? Carol's not a perfect person. None of us are. But she still got to touch that bliss for just a second. What does that mean? Uncle's religious. She's not as religious as she was growing up. Never comes up in the conversation. What does that mean? He didn't say, Mormons are wrong. You got to end up being a Jehovah's Witness or Southern Baptist. No, it wasn't anything. And you go, Jason, the talk was mostly about her staying behind. That's true. But I would argue that if I was a ghost and I wanted to make sure that my loved ones were in the afterlife, I would give them the cheat code. Tell them exactly how to get in. And that's something that we don't see these spirit guides doing. Fascinating stuff. Guys, Carol, thank you so much for sending this story over. I mean, again, this is the reason why Dead Rabbit Radio, to me, exists. It's collecting and cataloging all of these experiences and sharing them. Not just me sharing them with you, but you sharing them with me, us sharing them together, and then sharing them with other people. Even if you don't say, hey man, Dead Rabbit Radio is my favorite paranormal show. Even if you guys just say, hey, you want to hear something weird I heard? And you share these experiences and these stories, all of this stuff just continues to grow. And I love it, man. Like this really, if I didn't want to do this show, I'd stop doing this show. I love doing this show because of stuff like this. Because I get to spend my time reading ghost stories and weirdo conspiracies and stuff like that. And then share them. Love it. You know what's funny? We'll wrap it up like this. I know I keep saying that, but I remember when I watched Buffy the Vampire Slayer, OG fan, watched the first episode when it came out. My favorite character on the show was Giles, the librarian / watcher, who his whole thing was just researching. I mean, yeah, he did go out and fight demons and stuff like that. Sometimes Buffy needs help, but that was the character I identified with the most. This idea of having this library full of all these books about demons and monsters, and you could just go through and kind of investigate things like, well, something is killing all these kids. You might want to get right on that one, Giles. You're waiting a little too long to break open the books, but just going through books and cataloging all of this paranormal activity, and he was the character I identified with the most. And that's, in a way, I think what Dead Rabbit Radio is. It's just this catalog of all these bizarre stories. And maybe there's a through line. Maybe there isn't. Maybe it's just the collection of the world of the weird. I don't know. Maybe in the end, we'll be able to find a couple connections here, there, and maybe we're just having a lot of fun reading and trading stories. But guys, dude, 6 years, man. I'm super stoked. Again, I forgot about it, but I'm glad I remembered. And thank you guys for being here, whether this is your first episode or you've been here since episode 1. We love you guys. Saturday, 1 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Go to our YouTube channel, Dead Rabbit Radio, for our live stream. It's going to be a hoot. What sound does a rabbit make? Hoots for an owl. It'll be a chirp. It'll be a... Well, I don't even know what a rabbit sounds like, but anyways, it'll be that. It'll be whatever a rabbit sounds like. It'll be a that. Hope to see you guys there. DeadRabbitRadio@gmail.com is going to be our email address. You can also hit us up at Facebook.com/DeadRabbitRadio. TikTok is @DeadRabbitRadio. Dead Rabbit Radio is the daily paranormal conspiracy and true crime podcast. You don't have to listen to it every day. I'm glad you listened to it today. Have a great weekend, guys.